Hey guys, Sean from Top 5 Fit. Going to go over some core exercises in this video today. Want to actually take a look at some of the exercises that I use to pull down from 315 pounds. There was a point in time where all I liked to do was pick up heavy things, and that caused problems, back pain. Actually, at one point, actually strained my abdominal wall, and that's not a good thing. So these are some exercises that we kind of felt were very beneficial, but at the same time not executed in the greatest way, especially when I see people doing them in the gyms that I tend to frequent. First thing we're going to start with are basically hanging abdominals and hanging obliques. All right, some of you may have seen these in training facilities across the country, kind of thing. This particular brand is, Vallejo hanging abdominal cuffs. These sleeves are designed for you to be able to suspend your body weight just enough to pick up your knees, pick up the lower half of your body, and basically use your abdominal wall while suspended. I'd like to go over a couple of things as far as loading into these cuffs is concerned. A lot of, minor errors that ultimately make the exercise less effective. So we're going to kind of focus on positioning and where to actually set these cuffs for the beginning of this. First, start off by sliding the arms all the way in. And when I say all the way in, you want the cuff to actually be in contact with your armpit. When you're out here, it's kind of just hard to support your body weight just by the shoulder joint itself, and then you're putting all that pressure in the elbow. You've got space here to here that ultimately is going to allow you or force you to sink down, and you don't want to do that. So right off the bat, get those cuffs nice and tight into the armpit on both sides. So they should be right up against and close to your body, okay? When we go into picking our feet up off of the ground and actually curling the knees up to the chin and chest, we have to remember that, in the beginning of the movement, your hip flexors are going to take over. Very strong, powerful muscles right here that are responsible for picking up the legs already. It's not just a matter of getting the knees up. You also want to focus on actually getting your tail up as well, so that you're starting into the lower abdominals and then working your way up into the mid and the high. And when I say mid, low, mid, high, I'm talking about the region. It's not like this muscle group is separate muscle groups. You've got your transverse abdominis running under everything, your obliques on the sides, your abdominal wall in the front, and then of course your QL in the back. So we're talking about muscle groups that are working together, but it's not like we're taking individual sections and isolating individual sections as of yet. So for this, we want to focus on not only getting the knees up, but then curling the tail up as well. Once we load in, we're going to drop our body weight down, but you can see I'm keeping my head up and above the shoulders. A lot of times people have a tendency to get their head down here and just hang on their shoulder joints. That's not a good idea. That can cause discomfort and pain, and remember, we're trying not to do that. So ideally, you want to try and keep shoulders packed and strong and keep your head up above them during the entire exercise. So I'm going to start by just picking my feet up off of the ground. Now right here, as I said before, keeping the knees up and above the shoulders and preventing that sink down, you'll already engage the abdominal wall. As soon as you pick up your body weight, transverse abdominis, front of the abdominals, QL, they all fire just to hold your hips and legs still. So just being able to get into that position, we've already started the core work. Now we'll look into the movement. So once we're in position, feet are off of the ground, we're going to initiate by picking the knees up. Now, if you notice, getting the knees up to parallel, or at least parallel to the ground, that's all hip flexor. The abdominals are being used, but again, we're hitting more of this and less of this. So in order to make sure that we're actually digging into the abdominal wall, we want to focus on the tilt. So here, knees come up, and now I'm actually going to bring those knees up to my elbows as high as I can. As soon as you engage the pelvis and start rounding it forward, you're now working on the actions of the abdominal wall. So flexion is now happening not just at the hip flexors, it's happening because you're commanding the abdominal wall to do it as well. A lot of times too, people will forget to focus on the negative here. Remember, that's where you get stronger. That's where you kind of add density to the muscle tissue. So they'll pick their knees up and then drop. And that, of course, creates a swing. and it really kind of takes away 50% of the effectiveness of the exercise. So just as deliberately as I lifted my knees, I want to make sure I'm actually lowering them at the same pace. So up, lower. This is one of those exercises where doing things correctly matters. I see a lot of people rifling off 20, 30, 40 reps, and they'll tell you, I can do 20, 30, 40 reps, no problem. You're not engaging your abdominals the way you should by just kind of letting momentum carry you through the exercise. In a perfect world, you'll pause at the top, take your time on the way up during the contraction, and then try to use that same pace to lower your knees back into position. That way you're getting the maximum benefit of the complete exercise. All right, a variation off of the hanging abdominals, hanging obliques. Obviously, we can work the right and the left side in isolation. Again, the same rules apply. You want to make sure that the cuffs are nice and close to the armpits. Your head is above your shoulders. You're supporting your body weight, controlling it, making sure that the count on the positive is the same as the negative to avoid any unnecessary swing. The only difference really in position is we're going to start off by actually turning the waist, turning the hips, and focusing on picking up the top of the hip. So I'll try not to block out the video with my large hips here, but ultimately, once I load into position and pick the feet up, I'm going to turn. So once I'm here, the focus is bringing up this part of the leg as high as you can. Now, a lot of times, people will ultimately engage the hip flexors because they are stronger muscle, it's a stronger muscle group, and they won't actually pick the hip up, but they'll do this kind of knee raise thing to the side. That may be firing your obliques, but it sure as hell isn't contracting them to their maximum potential. You're using them to stay in the position, but again, we're just kind of swinging and putting momentum on them. You want to focus on actually picking up that hip. So once I'm in position here, I want to actually lift and get that hip as high up towards my chin as I can. When you're focusing on that kind of a movement, and again, of course, the vacuum rules apply when you're always working your abs, make sure you're sucking in as hard as you can. When you're focusing on picking the hip up, you actually focus on the obliques. That's the muscle, or at least the side of the core that's doing the work, creating the movement, and then you can actually focus on that negative as well by lowering the hips as slow as possible. Obviously, you want to try and keep it even, so if you do 10 on the right, make sure you do 10 on the left. This is another one of those exercises where quality is much more important than quantity. So I've seen people do 50 of these things in a row, but their knees aren't either coming up as high as they need to, or it's just a continuous swing. When you're focusing on your core, which is something that I'm trying to do and a lot of you are trying to do, you really want to pay attention to quality. So when you turn that waist and you turn those hips, you really want to focus on getting that hip up as high as you can, as opposed to just kicking the knees up and using the big muscle groups of the hip to kind of do the movement for you. Another variation of core work in the cuffs, we can actually take that oblique work and work it right to left. Now, obviously, we could pick up the hip on one side, drop, pick up the hip on the other side, but that kind of goes against the whole time on tension, thing where you want to kind of keep the muscle under tension as long as possible, because that's, of course, what creates the most change. So ideally, what we'll think about doing is taking the knees in an arc pattern from right to left and kind of focusing on lengthening the obliques on one side, contracting on the opposite side, and then reversing right to left, of course. So from here, we'll actually pick up, bring the knees forward, and lower down. Pick up the hip, swing the knees in front, and lower the hip down. Obviously, it takes a little bit of control, and that's not something that you want to whip through. It's not all about super fast reps. You want to try to get through every inch of that movement as controlled and slow as possible. And as long as you're thinking along those lines, the core will start kind of pulling in line, and you get ridiculously strong too. Some of your training facilities might not actually have these cuffs, and that's okay. If you want to do any type of suspended abdominal work, all you really need is something that's to support your body weight above your head. And I have these bars. So ideally, if I want to do a knee raise, I like to take a chin-up grip, so the palms are going to be towards, hang, and lower. Now obviously that's going to require a little bit more grip strength, a little bit more upper body strength, and you may have to drop your rep count just a little bit in your workout if you're not ready for, 10, 15, 20, whatever. But the idea is you can still get these exercises done as long as you've got something above your head to grab. Okay, another core exercise that I'm a big fan of, straight leg raises on a vertical knee raise. Now there's variations of this particular machine in just about every, it's not really a machine, it's just kind of a big standard piece of metal stuck together. There's many variations of this particular apparatus in most gyms. Some of them actually have the chin-up bar that comes up over top, which is never in your way and doesn't do anything to stop you from doing this particular exercise. Some of them don't. Some of them have a pad back here so that you can, if you are going to do the next exercise that we're about to do on your elbows, you can actually support your lower back here. For the sake of this video, we're going to do things on our hands. That's just what I have a tendency to do, and it's more comfortable, and I feel like I can actually execute the exercise better. So first thing you want to do is load in, and that's pretty easy. A lot of times there's, bars or whatever that you can step up on. Okay, we'll start out with hand placement. What you're going to want to do is make sure and line up basically the thick part of your thumb and the spacing between your index and your thumb, and get that right over top of the bar that's parallel to the ground. If you're too deep and your thumb is actually too pointed to the ground, you're going to put a lot of stress on your wrist right here. Your body weight is going to be supported by this grip, and that's just a real easy way to create irritation. So you want to make sure that that wrist kind of lines up with the bar right up underneath it, and you've got equal thumb and index finger wrapped around. Make sure you're squeezing and actual gripping the bar. Try to avoid any false grips or anything like that on this. And then of course we do the same thing on the opposite side. The rules for this are pretty much the same as the hanging abdominals in the cuffs. You want to stay strong through the shoulders and focus on keeping your head above your shoulders and basically your traps and back loaded. So I'll take one foot off at a time, and my head again stays up. So I'm not letting my head sink down between my shoulders. I'm staying stable and keeping the head up above the shoulders, arms fairly straight, locked. I'll step back just to maintain the position. Now, some apparatus has bars behind you. I do have a tendency to, just for support, place the elbow on those. You don't have to, it's kind of up to you. If you know you have an issue with hyperextension or hypermobile elbows, you bend too far forward or you have stability issues going back, then obviously go ahead and use them. But considering how I actually like to take my legs above 90 degrees, this just adds a little bit to extra support, especially when you're trying to control the movement. So we'll load back into position, head is above the shoulders, legs stay straight. Now, ideally, here is where we want to be. We want to try to get the legs parallel to the floor, but tucking the tail still matters. So getting the legs up a little higher than parallel is, of course, desired. You'll notice my legs coming down a little bit faster than they were over in the cuffs. When your legs are straight and your body weight is suspended on your grip, it can be a little bit more challenging, obviously, to enjoy that negative and lower the legs slower. Something I'm working on, something obviously you will work on while you're doing this. Unless you are a level 10 gymnast, then you should be able to hold those legs out at 90 degrees for a while. But for the sake of this video, we're just going to try to make sure we're not plummeting to the ground. We're just kind of lowering the legs as slow as we can under control. So grip, load, lift. All right, this last core exercise is for the low back and the glutes. And the only thing you really need is a bench, someplace to put basically your upper body on. And then we're going to focus on extending the legs, straightening the legs out, contracting the low back and contracting the glutes in order to get things parallel to the ground. So getting into position, stomach down, chest down on a bench, and you want your hips off of the bench. So guys, obviously don't crush anything. Girls, you don't have to worry about crushing anything, but just make sure your pelvis is at the edge of the bench. Wherever you can get a grip is fine, whatever's comfortable. I have a tendency to just grab the middle bar right in front of me. You want toes to stay on the ground, knees bent. What you're going to do is start to squeeze the quads, straighten the legs out, and at the same time, Use the glutes, hamstrings, and low back to get your legs parallel to the ground. Point the toes at the top. Obviously, you can do this exercise in isolation as well, just doing one side over the other. And same rules apply as the rest of the core exercises. Quality matters over quantity. You want to make sure that you're feeling that contraction in your hamstrings, in your glutes, and in your low back, focusing on getting the legs as parallel to the ground as you can with a toe point. If you have any other questions or concerns, comments, anything else you want to know, or if there's anything you want us to cover, make sure and leave a message in the comment box. Don't forget to hit the like button and make sure to subscribe for more videos. Thanks again.